Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we are finishing up our three-part series on the controllables. So we are going to talk this week about controlling your position in the ring and how you can use that to influence how well you're getting on in your matches. Stick with us.
Everybody, welcome back to Fight Chat Friday. So this is the episode where we're going to really focus on ring position. Very important thing you want to control in a sparring match. Obviously, we're talking about warnings and exits, how that influences your scores. Also, if you score as you exit the ring, it's not going to count. So this is a very important topic that we need to be aware of, and we need to be aware of how to control it. As well as if you have more space behind you, you have more exit space and you have more time to react. So this is a very, very important topic in itself. If you can control this, you're in a good way to very much take control of the match. And you notice that some of these things that we mentioned today will also nicely tie up into our first two episodes, where you can control the distance and the timing and rhythm and tempo, all of that stuff. They're very much linked together. So here are our first two episodes. So if you're interested, go check them out. So we talk about in the first one how to control the rhythm and the tempo. The second episode, how to control the distance. So you'll see how these very much interlink here for this episode of the ring positioning.
Absolutely. So I suppose the very first thing to understand with what we're really talking about here is we're not just talking about the position relative to the other person. We're now talking about where are you having the match taking place or the action taking place in the ring, and what's the intention of that. And maybe we'll start with the first and the kind of the most obvious one in terms of holding the center. So something that we'd often tell students, look, if you have the option to do it, you probably want to. And it goes back to our episode on maximizing scores or the visibility of scores. If you're in the middle and the other person is towards the edge, there's a better chance of being seen. So we're talking about that concept of holding the center, and really it is in that yellow square there, just the center kind of 8 to 16 mats that we're talking about. So looking at a couple of examples of people doing this well.
Yeah, so here's Norway in blue and very much controlling that center, and you can see the angle that he cuts off as well. So you can see the steps he makes to cut off that space to really control that center. So that's why that actual yellow box in the visual we showed is important, because he actually cuts off the angle that he gives his opponent as an out to get back to the center, which is a very, very important part of controlling that center square.
Yeah, and of course the big thing that being in the center means you don't have to move as far as your opponent in order to, to line up your next shot or angle. By being closer to the center of the square and turning the ring into effectively a circle, your opponent has to take the longer way around, and so it can make it so that they're working harder than you to achieve, what their goals are.
Yeah, very important. And you can see here, Sarah in red is doing a great job of actually taking back that center when there's some action. So you might have to give it up for a second, but she works very hard to take control of it again immediately, which is a very important point of controlling the ring position.
And while those first two athletes that we've looked at have used side kick in particular and a side-facing stance to control it, there is the option as well to be a little bit more full-facing and to use your hands to control the center of the ring as well, or at least the threat of hands. So if you can be in a position where, you're dominant with the hands and you're able to control the distance between you and your opponent enough, the hands can also be a very effective way of controlling that center space.
Yeah, because we spoke about that, didn't we, the threat in the distance episode, that to control the distance you need to really have a good threat, and there needs to be a threat which allows the other side to say, okay, maybe I'm going to get hit, so they have to respect the space between you.
Absolutely. So maybe if you're in control of the center, it brings on that option of squeezing the space. So taking space away from your opponent by reducing the space between the edge of the ring and you, so they have to exist and live in that space.
Yeah, and this is a vital skill, especially towards the end of a match, where maybe last 20 seconds where you're behind on the scoreboard and you need some scores. Squeezing this space not only will get some warnings on the board for you, but will also maybe potentially squeeze the space in terms of the exits your opponent has, which increases the potential of you scoring as well, because they have less opportunity to move and avoid.
Yeah, they don't have that simple option of just go backwards. So another example of this, again, using the front leg quite extensively for this part of it, but we've Adam Shelley here and Luke Woods, and you can look at the footwork in terms of closing off the angles, and that's really a huge part of this squeezing of the space. It's not enough to put pressure on your opponent. You have to deny them opportunities to exit, or give them opportunities that will set up a shot for you.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a controlled aggression thing as well, of just balancing, not going for it too much, but at the same time being calculated with your forward pressure. So it's very, very important that you don't go absolutely gung-ho, because the other side will probably pick you off, and that's where we will see in next couple of sections where some people actually want this style to pull their opponent in, to be more on the elusive side, to make them overshoot, and then they will capitalize with a nice counter.
Now we can also use momentum as a way to squeeze that space and push our opponent towards the edge of the ring.
Yeah, this is a nice clip here of Germany in blue. Yeah, trying to double up. Again, you can see the tempo from our episode 1 here is very important, and the work rate. So they go very much hand in hand in controlling the ring position and getting your opponent on the back foot. Essentially, what you're doing here is you're just taking away any options they have.
Yeah, once you've committed them to moving backwards, it's much easier to then follow and open up your range and repertoire of shots once the person's committed to a straight line movement. Very difficult to do that while there's a preserved safe space between you and your opponent, and they have the options to go right and left. So we're definitely looking at ways of cutting that off as we go.
Yeah, shots and bunches is important for that, really, isn't it? The single shots probably aren't going to be enough of a threat to get your opponent to respect it enough.
So you were mentioning in that last part that there are people who like to live on the edge, okay, and it's not always living dangerously. It brings them into positions where they can throw predictable counters and shots that they're going to enjoy throwing. So this is the concept of pulling your opponent with you and you leading the movement, but backwards and towards the edge of the ring.
Yeah, so we see some nice clips here with back kicks in particular, but here's Louise. She's almost luring her opponent in. You can see she's already winning 4-0 at this moment. So she's inviting her opponent in. She knows her opponent has to come to get the scores back. So she uses it very well. Very clever. Lures her in. And then nice back kick.
And the same here again with Neil up against Cosman from Romania. And what we're looking at again is that idea of there's a backward movement, there's an invitation, and sometimes this can be something, even to start the match, if you're a counter fighter and you don't want to go on the aggressive, stepping back towards the edge of the ring almost invites your opponent. It's like, well, you kind of have to do something now. I'm standing right here just on the edge of this cliff. If you push me out, there's going to be a warning as well. And it's really just issuing that open invitation, come in and take this score. It's there for you. But in so doing, it gives you an action to work with. So, it's leading. Yeah,
you've seen it there with Neil's just like shoulder shrug as if he was going to go for the reverse punch himself, and that kind of lowered his opponent in then. So he's almost like that step ahead of he pulls them in, and that's what the idea of pulling is. You invite them into the shot. It's almost too good to take it. They have to go for it, and then you set them up.
Absolutely. Now, in getting back to the edge of the ring and back to the corners, it's not always somewhere you want to be, but it's somewhere that you sometimes have to go to. And when you get there, again, pulling is something that we can use to reverse the situation if you're prepared for it. But we want to look at ways maybe to change the ring position and take control from that, we'll say on a completely blank slate. Being in the corner is bad. But, taking control of it from that point of view and looking at options that you have to change the position for your advantage.
Yeah, so you got to remember the whole title of this little mini series is you being in control. So you may be on the edge and you may be moving around, but you're that step ahead, which is the important part. You're the proactive side. So whether you're lowering them in or whether you're taking complete control on the front foot, you're still the one in control of how it flows.
And we can see a very nice example here with Anthony. He is pulling, but he makes that little, fake lift for the side kick and follows the hands, and now he's finishing this clip where he was very definitely in the back seat, pulling around the edge of the ring. That one little movement with the push through and that little bit of momentum with it, and he's taken that centre ring, and I think, it's a really good example of that one.
Yeah, here's a lovely one from Louise, one of Adrian's students as well. She gets a nice little angle, and she's actually 2 or 3 clips of this as well, where great example is just switching the position completely from being on the edge. So now she has the center of the ring. So a great little tool. If you can push forwards and get that angle as your opponent commits, it's a nice little option for reversals.
For sure. This is a slightly more slick skill, but very, very effective as well.
Yeah, Axel Vargas here in blue from Argentina. He's a very wiry competitor, so he's able to get under nice and quick there, and he's quite fiery and lively. So you need to be brave and dynamic for this one.
Yeah, I mean, the X-ray is definitely one where we've looked at it before, and sometimes the referees don't like it, but it can be very effective. And I think the quicker you get it turned around, the more likely you'll come out on the good side of the referees.
Definitely, yeah. And here's Julio Carlos in red. We spoke about this springboard side kick before, and you can notice how he's on the edge. Now, he's one of the guys who likes kind of living on the edge, but he very cleverly picks his moments to take the center and take control as well, to relieve that space from time to time. And the springboard side kick of dropping it and lifting it immediately again is a nice option there to get your opponent on the back foot and take that center.
Absolutely, and it does give you that rapid change of pace, and sometimes getting back to the middle or getting back into better position sometimes involves moving further away. So giving yourself, like, moving back quicker to give yourself more time to lift that front leg and have it in the air before you're pushing forward. Because although you're feeling the pressure maybe as you're going back to the edge or the corners, if you just try to kick off the front leg, often the space is a bit too tight and it gives your opponent the chance to step through over the top with the hands. So sometimes you need to create even more space, and go right to the edge in order to pick up your front leg and go forward, because once your leg's in the air, it's much more difficult for them to come through with hands, and they're going to have to take a direct counter with legs. So that kind of thing is something that we can, definitely look to do when you have to reverse that position. And then sometimes you just have the lead, or you're trying to really invite and pull your opponent, and we go into what we call rabbit mode, which is, one person definitely has the incentive to chase the other, and they're taking full advantage of that. So catch me if you can. You've titled that one.
Yeah, so again, Julio is a fantastic example of this. His work rate and his conditioning allows him to do this, as well as his footwork and balance. So he almost is consistently pulling his opponent on, trying to set them up for a counter attack. Yeah. But he's always the one in the driving seat. It may look like he's just running and avoiding, but it's not the way at all. He's in the driving seat here, and he's setting his opponent up, baiting him, setting traps. And we see here's a great example, 4-0 up towards the end of the match, inviting his opponent to come on, and scores a lovely shot, switches the bande, and seals it on the scorecard. So it's a nice little style, but it's something that takes a lot of practice, good conditioning, good understanding of distance. You need to be consistently on balance, but if you can nail it, very, very good style, and it's a lovely one to watch as well.
And the real question, did he learn it from his big brother? Maybe he did. But this is, again, Emmanuel Carlos looking at really pulling and leading his opponent around and waiting for the right opportunity to be the first. So, again, this isn't about running away only. This is about trying to find the timing and the spacing so that you can engage when the advantage is yours. And it, it's certainly, if it's preferable when the other person has an incentive to come get you. So you often have to get that lead initially to be able to do it.
Definitely, yeah. Here's Axel again. We've seen a clip from him already, but as we said, he's very, very quick on the feet. So he likes to get a score and then make you chase him, where he'll try to counter you and pick you off again. So it's a nice little style. It's an entertaining one as well. So another guy who people love to watch, Miloš from Poland. It's just very, very hard to hit him, and that's the aim of the game at the end of the day. Hit without getting hit. So
it puts all of those advantages that we were talking about back in your court, and in the end, that is what we want. And what we're talking about through this whole series is, no matter what the situation is, this on the scoreboard, in the match, where you are in the ring, we like to see it as, look, there are still things you can control, and by taking control of those controllables one at a time, you can put yourself back in a better position in the match. Now, unfortunately, the clock will always be against you, so if you find yourself in a bad situation with not very much time on the clock, look, there might not be much you can do. But in general, we're talking about, again, just to remind everyone, those controllables. We have the distance between you and your opponent, we have the rhythm and tempo of the match, and we have the ring position. And while they all sound like, none of those are getting me scores, in fact, they really are all about getting you scores, keeping you safe from scores, the hitting without being hit. And it helps that they're universal, so you can always act on those. And I think really that was our point in this series, is that, yes, tactics, yes, skills, yes, shots, but you also have to understand the underlying conditions that let you make use of those.
And you can see here there's no one size fits all. So sometimes it's nice to hold the center, control the middle.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to be on the outside and lure opponents in. So it's about finding what works for you. And the whole idea of finding what works for you is that we can't train this unless it's something that we do in unison with a partner and a live opponent. You can't train this on pads, distance, tempo, all of this stuff. You need to have that live opponent to make the correct decisions based on the realities that we see in front of us. So it just shows the way that you train is also very, very important, and you want to have them as realistic to sparring as often as possible.
Yeah, as representative as possible. And I mean, that's the thing that we've been talking about so often is, you know, when we're setting up our scenarios, our engagements, or whatever it happens to be in the training session, we have to have these things in mind. And when we look at the drills that are happening, if it's repetitions on a pad, are we actually controlling any of these controllables? And because if we don't learn to control them, we can't actually step up and adjust those dials mid-match to get the advantage to ourselves again. All we can do is throw the shots that we've practiced. So this is
not just the shots.
It's not just the shots. This is the where, the when, the why, and the how, you know?
It's how you put the shots in play and not get hit with them or hit with them. So like there's much more that goes on than just the actual end product. So that's the important takeaway, I think, for people who may be watching this.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, that is the end of our 3-part series on the controllables. And I think next week we have quite a different chat for everybody. And we're having a little interview, and those have always been popular. So hopefully this will be a nice chat for everybody to tune in on this time next week.
Yeah, and it also very much relates to the type of training we just spoke about here. So if you enjoyed this and it kind of got an idea of, okay, how can I change my training to get this type of a style and learn these real skills, then check out that episode next week.
Excellent. All right, folks, until next Friday, we'll see you soon.